On this, the 2023 New Year's Eve edition of What's Going On with Shipping, a Maersk ship has been attacked. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, hoping to get out of the new year with maybe a positive video, but nope. The Houthi have other plans, and so does Maersk, for running their ships through the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandab, and the Gulf of Aden. We have been following this from the very beginning. We know that Maersk had initially withdrew their ships following an attack on December 14th against the Maersk Gibraltar, and then following a series of convoy operations by the U.S. Navy and Allied navies under Operation Prosperity Guardian that ran 4 U.S. flag vessels through the region, including 3 vessels of Maersk Line Limited. This is the subsidiary of A.P. Møller Maersk in Denmark. Maersk Lines decided to send their ships back through the region, and they sent over a dozen vessels heading there, and we saw the big transit start taking place yesterday. This resulted in an attack on one vessel twice, the Maersk Hangzhou, and we're going to discuss that issue, those 2 attacks, and what this means going forward. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So this is the report put out on Twitter X by U.S. Central Command. They've been very forthcoming on these issues. This was yesterday. USS Gravely shot down 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles while responding to Houthi attack on a merchant vessel. Today at approximately 6:30 p.m., this is on December 30th, the container ship Maersk Hangzhou reported that they were struck by a missile while transiting the southern Red Sea. The ship was coming through the Gulf of Aden, heading up into the Suez. I'll show you the track of the vessel here in a few moments. The Singapore flag, Denmark-owned operated container ship requested assistance, and USS Gravely and USS Laboon, these are both Burke-class destroyers, responded to the ship. The vessel is reportedly seaworthy and no reported injuries. While responding, the Gravely engaged and shot down 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles fired from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen toward the ships. So it's not clear who they were targeting with these anti-ship ballistic missiles. Was it the Maersk Hangzhou? Was it the Gravely? But no matter what, the Gravely engaged and shot them down. This marks the 23rd illegal attack against shipping since November 19th. So this is a style of attacks we have seen. Matter of fact, this is the style of attacks that led to Maersk deciding to boycott and go around. They, along with Hapag-Lloyd, were the first shipping lines to announce they were heading around Africa. However, Maersk became the first shipping line to announce they were returning. Now, the second attack is a bit more disturbing. On December 31st at 6:30 a.m., the container ship Maersk Hangzhou issued a second distress call in less than 24 hours, reporting being under attack by 4 Iranian-backed Houthi small boats. Okay, it appears as if Maersk Hangzhou was not being escorted. In other words, there was not a direct escort. In the first case, Laboon and Gravely had to respond to the distress call. Here, in the second case, same thing. So it appears that the Maersk ships that are now going through the area, along with other major container liners that are going through, are not being directly escorted, as was the case with the U.S. flag vessels. And this means that the U.S. Navy and other navies in the area, the British, the French, and other allied forces of Operation Prosperity Guardian, have to respond. It goes on here. The small boats originating from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen fired crew-served and small arms weapons at the Maersk Hangzhou, getting to within 20 meters of the vessel, extremely close, and attempted to board the vessel. A contract-embarked security team on Maersk Hangzhou returned fire. So Maersk has hired private security detachments to come on board. This is a fairly common thing for this region. They were initially created to deal with Somali pirates. And this was done, you would embark an embark team. Basically what the ship would do is meet with a small supply vessel before heading into a area. They would embark the team with their weapons. They would ride through the area, and once clear of the area, that embarked team and their weapons would get off to another supply boat. And in turn, that team would get on another vessel heading the opposite way. Well, it seems like Maersk has hired those private security teams. I can't help but note that there was a time back in August where the U.S. Navy was talking about putting U.S. Marines on board privately owned ships because of fears of attacks by Iranians up in the Straits of Hormuz. That's not being done here. Instead, Maersk is relying on its private security teams. U.S. helicopters from the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the region, and Gravely, again, responded to the distress call. And in the process of issuing verbal calls to the small boats, they would do this over VHF and via loudspeaker, the small boats fired upon the U.S. helicopters with crew-served weapons and small arms, thereby writing their death warrant, by the way, because the minute you open fire on U.S. aircraft, that's the end of it. The U.S. Navy helicopter returned fire in self-defense, sinking 3 of the 4 small boats and killing the crews. The 4th boat fled the area. There is no damage to U.S. personnel or equipment. All of this represents a massive escalation in the scale and style of attacks. So not only are we having the Houthi shooting missiles at ships, but now we are trying to grab these vessels, because the only reason for these armed crews to get on board are either to just kill the crew or to steal the vessel, and Maersk Hangzhou is a substantial size vessel. But let's go back to the root cause of this. Why is it we're seeing this happening now? Back on December 29th, the last iteration of the convoys with U.S. flag ships went through the region. Back prior to Christmas, we had 4 vessels go through, 3 Maersk vessels, and a U.S. flag car carrier. Now what you're seeing here is several vessels go through. In this case, 2 Maersk vessels went through on December 29th and December 30th. The Maersk Detroit, coming through the Suez down the Red Sea, is eventually going into Djibouti. And then the Maersk Kinloss, coming out of India through Oman and into the Gulf of Aden and back up through this region. These ships were directly escorted by ships of Operation Prosperity Guardian. And the reason I know that is a couple of things. Number one, we have this great image here provided by Tom Bike. He caught the ships heading through the southern Red Sea. This is Maersk Kinloss right here. This is the U.S. flagged container liner of Maersk Line Limited. And this is the French frigate Languedoc. And then a third vessel, not exactly sure who this is in the region. And to give you a better image, this is a image that I was able to obtain from Maersk Kinloss. This is looking aft off the stern of Kinloss. There's Languedoc, a very distinct profile, a Frem-class frigate. And then another ship, and I'm not sure if the other ship just tagged along. This happened a lot during the tanker war, where in the 1980s, when the U.S. Navy went in to escort ships, when a convoy was formed, ships would just tag on to them to kind of get the protection from it. Or it could be another ship that is being convoyed at the time. But what you're seeing here is the ships under U.S. registry are getting close convoys of this. We know the French had done the same thing for CMA CGM, the French-owned lines. But Maersk ships are Danish-owned and in a series of different registries. In the case of Maersk Hangzhou, it's a Singapore flag vessel. So let's talk about the background here and what is going on, because what is happening here is extremely important to put into the context of why Maersk decided to run basically a dozen ships through this region. So this story back from December 28th, about 299 container ships have rerouted to avoid the Red Sea, doubling in number from last week. Maersk starts scheduling Suez Canal transits as Hapag-Lloyd steers clear. Now, this is a Reuters story from December 27th. This is right after Maersk announced on December 24th they were resuming their passages. Now, not all container liners hopped in on this. Maersk and Hapag were the 2 companies that started this back on December 14th. Hapag said they're not going to do it. Maersk said, we will do it, but as I noted in some previous videos, Maersk was very selective about who they decided was going to go on these routes. In the meantime, some other companies did start sending some vessels through. CMA CGM was planning to gradually increase sailings through the Red Sea. Now, CMA CGM had already been running ships through this region. They had the benefit of having that French frigate, the Languedoc, in the area. We've seen that that ship did some escorts. And so the carriers are having this kind of competition and positioning, according to John Conrad, that's really complicating what is happening right now in and around the Red Sea. Now, sailing around Africa does many things. It's going to add costs to the shipment because of additional fuel and ship charter charges. You're going to have delays for suppliers and retailers. It dumps a lot more pollution into the air because of the longer sea voyages. This is a big issue regarding climate change and requirements under IMO 2023. But in the backdrop of this, you had the Pentagon, the United States military, asserting that the Red Sea was becoming much safer because of the series of convoys of U.S. ships, the 4 vessels just prior to Christmas, and then the 2 most recently. You were getting this assertion that, okay, we haven't seen any major attacks on ships. Now, granted, you have the MSC United 8 attack that happened, but that was a near miss. The ship was not hit by a ballistic missile. USS Laboon responded to that and was able to escort the vessel out of the area. But some of the ship owners were not buying in. However, Maersk did. And as I mentioned to you before, Maersk had a strategy, I believe, here for bringing their vessels in. So here's the route for Maersk Hangzhou over the past 30 days. You'll notice the ship was over here in Asia, going between China and Korea. It then eventually came through Singapore, and when it got out of the Straits of Malacca, it took that route heading for the southern tip of South Africa. Again, it was on that diversion route. Then all of a sudden, it turned, and this is when Maersk decided, after the convoys were announced and kicking through in Christmas, to go ahead head that way. And so Maersk Hangzhou makes that run for the Gulf of Aden. It turns off its AIS. We know it's up here in the southern Red Sea somewhere. It had gotten through when the attack took place. But this shows you the level of the diversion that Maersk was willing to go through. They were willing to take the chance and run this ship through. Now, Maersk Hangzhou was not alone in this area. So this is the region we're talking about here. Again, here's the Red Sea. This is Yemen. It's that western side of Yemen, which is Houthi controlled. So the attacks tend to be taking place right down here into the Bab el-Mandeb and then out into the Gulf of Aden. Now, there's traffic flowing through here, and I'll show you that in a second. What I've done is clean this up. The vessels you see here right now in green, these are container ships over 6,000 TEU. TEU is 20-foot equivalent unit. The one circled in red are U.S. vessels. So you're getting to see some ships. So right down here, Maersk Detroit, which came through the other day. But right here, you'll notice all these vessels that have turned around. They're pointing the other direction. That's the Met Maersk, Chastine Maersk, St. Inez, which is part of Maersk Lines also, and Madison Maersk. These are ships that have basically turned around. You'll notice one ship heading still to the Bab el-Mandeb. That is the COSCO Shipping Kilimanjaro. That is a ship of Chinese Overseas Shipping Company. COSCO is the national shipping line of China, and it's going to be interesting whether COSCO Kilimanjaro keeps heading through. Remember, the Chinese Navy, the PLAN, the People's Liberation Army's Navy 45th Escort Group, is based out of here in Djibouti. They have not been doing much besides putting out promotional videos saying they'll come to your aid, but haven't. But maybe they're going to escort in the Kilimanjaro. And then up here in the Red Sea, you'll see ships waiting. So here's the Mary Maersk. Here you have CMA CGM Elbe, and then a pair of Maersk ships, Gertrude Maersk and Maersk Genoa, and then 2 U.S. ships, the Green Bay, which went through. It was one of those original ships that went through the convoy. It went up to Aqaba in Jordan and now is coming back down. And then the Liberty Glory also sitting here waiting to get through. So you have basically traffic at a standstill for the large container ships and U.S. flagged vessels. If you macro scale this thing out and look at 4,000 TEU container ships, you'll see that the route around Africa is just packed with them. Remember, we've seen a lot of container ships divert to this route because of the low water in the Panama Canal. So they were heading to Europe to transload their cargo. So this is a significant event taking place. And now Maersk has ordered a 48-hour hold. Then we see stories like this. This came out the other day that Denmark is going to send one of their frigates to the U.S.-led operation. I can't help but think that this is largely because of Maersk Lines. Same time, the Danish unions secure hazard pay for mariners navigating the Red Sea. So I did a post on LinkedIn about this. And understand, double pay for mariners, it sounds great. It's good for the mariners. But it's less than 7 days of double pay. It's also a minuscule amount that Maersk is paying to their crews based on the overall what they're getting for this. It is as minimal as you can do. Minimum wage for working on a ship right now is $666 a month. That equates to about $22, $23 a day. So for maybe 7 days, you get twice that amount. Again, you're not even getting the amount it costs Maersk to move one container. So again, pretty minimal when you look at what Maersk is paying at this time. I note this story way back in August, and I referred to it earlier in the story, that the U.S. Navy, and particularly the U.S. Marine Corps, on board the Bataan Amphibious Ready Group, this is the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, back in August, had trained 100 Marines and sailors to ride commercial ships in zone defense against Iran. This is when the Iranians were attacking ships coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. We don't see that being done right now. At least we don't see it clearly being done. There's been no articulation that U.S. military personnel are being put on ships as security detachments. Maersk Hangzhou had a private security detachment on board. Plus, the Bataan Amphibious Ready Group left the region. The entire amphibious group is now up in the Mediterranean, so we just don't know if this was being done at all, but they talked about it back in August, so... And then I come back to my story. This is the story I posted the other day. I had a whole video on this that I'll have linked into the show notes here. I talked about the idea that, number one, this issue is the convoys were being done for the U.S. flag vessels. But now, should the U.S. Navy provide escort service for the foreign flag ships of A.P. Møller, based in Denmark? Remember, these ships are being operated outside of the U.S. registry because they're paying less money for taxes. And one of the things tax money goes to is national defense. And this is a big question. I know a lot of people are saying, of course, the U.S. Navy should be freedom of the seas, protecting the seas, without a doubt. However, who pays for that? Because a lot of these ships that are going to and from this area are carrying cargo between Europe and Asia. And a lot of that cargo is for Europe and Asia. There's still American cargo on there. Don't get me wrong, and American benefits from this. But what's happening? There's a question about the war risk insurance that's being paid. Is Maersk able to get lower war risk insurance based on the fact that the U.S. Navy and other allied navies are patrolling the area? Currently, when I wrote this, there was a carrier strike group and most of the amphibious ready group in the area. Well, now the amphib group isn't there anymore. And there is a question about how long the carrier strike group will remain in the area. How long can the U.S. maintain this level of protection? And again, it can do it indefinitely. Don't get me wrong. People just jump in and sit there and say, well, we can replenish and do it. Yeah, I understand that. But there's a political issue here. How long does the U.S. want to remain politically in this region defending the area? And again, it comes back down to the root cause of this, which is the Israel-Hamas conflict. That is the root cause of this. Now you have a direct attack on the U.S. Navy. We've seen allegations of it or inferences of it. The Laboon was supposedly targeted by drones. Now we had Gravely, which was engaging anti-ballistic missiles. But now you have U.S. helicopters off the Eisenhower and Gravely that were shot at by Houthi boats. This is a direct attack. And the question becomes, what is the U.S. response from this? So far, the U.S. has not wanted to engage directly. And I would argue there's a lot of reasons about that. You're coming into an election year. Biden and the Biden administration has been plagued by issues of foreign policy, particularly the terrible withdrawal from Afghanistan. Do you really want to put U.S. ground forces back into the Arabian Peninsula? So do you put more forces in the ground? And remember, the Houthi have been being bombed by the Saudis and the Saudi-backed Yemen government for a decade with no effect. Yes, we've put more sanctions against the Houthi. We're trying to stop the flow of weapons to the Houthi. But in truth, you're not going to stop the flow of weapons to the Houthi. They're going to keep getting their weapons, and they're going to keep flinging them at shipping in the area. Maersk has got 48 hours now to decide what they're going to do. Do they turn around and go the other way? I think Maersk is going to lobby extremely heavily to get convoys, direct convoys, with U.S. Navy destroyers riding on their hip through this region to clear it out. Now, they may do that to clear the ships that are in the area out. The question is, do we see the regular establishment of armed convoys through the Bab el-Mandab? Do we see Tom Hanks and Greyhound running ships through here in a usual kind of fashion and set up these routes? That would be advantageous for Maersk and some shipping lines because they would be able to route directly through the Bab el-Mandab up in there and provide a nice premium service, which I'm sure they're going to charge through the nose for, while the vast majority of ships head around the southern tip of Africa, taking longer and requiring even more money to go through because of added fuel and port handling charges and ship charges. It's all a mess. And this doesn't look like it's going to get better heading into 2024. I was hoping for a good new year. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, first, give it a big old thumbs up there. We always like likes, but you can also support the page directly by hitting the super thanks button down below where you can contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. I want to wish everybody out there, no matter who you are, a very happy and merry new year. Hopefully we have a better year in 2024 than we've been having for the past few years. I keep hoping that. Keep hoping it's going to be better. We shall see. Until our next episode, this is Sal, signing off.